Now on WUSA 9 News, we're helping you get ready for Election Day in Virginia with our special report, Virginia Decides. I'm Rafael Sanchez Cruz. Every Tuesday and Friday until Election Day, November 4th, we're bringing you in-depth election context and perspective right here on WUSA 9 Plus. The elections in Virginia are being closely watched across the country, especially the race for governor. But why is that race so important? First, only 2 states hold their elections for governor 1 year after the presidential election, Virginia and New Jersey. That means they're often seen as a test of how voters feel about who's in the White House. Typically, the party in power in the White House loses the Virginia governor's race. We saw that in 2021 when Governor Glenn Youngkin won while Joe Biden was president. And this year, Youngkin's Lieutenant Governor Winsome Earle-Sears is running for his seat. She's going up against Democrat Abigail Spanberger. Over the weekend, President Trump seemed to endorse Earle-Sears. Here's what he had to say aboard Air Force One.
Well, I think the Republican candidate is very good, and I think she should win because the Democrat candidate's a disaster. So I haven't been too much involved in Virginia. I love the state. I did very well in the state. But I will tell you, I think the Republican candidate is excellent, and I think the Democrat candidate is a disaster. I mean, I watched her in the debate. She couldn't answer the most basic question.
Now, Trump has appeared hesitant supporting Earle-Sears. He did, however, publicly support Republican Jason Miyares in the Attorney General race. Trump posted this on Truth Social, saying Miyares has his complete and total endorsement. The president also called for Miyares' opponent, Jay Jones, to drop out of the race following his text message scandal. Meantime, former President Barack Obama is endorsing Abigail Spanberger. He plans to rally with her in Norfolk before Election Day. Today, the former Transportation Secretary, Pete Buttigieg, was also out on the trail helping mobilize Democrat voters. Our Matthew Torres has more from today's event in Fredericksburg.
A roaring crowd to greet Democratic state delegate candidates running for another term or hoping to flip a seat.
You are knocking on doors for Lottie Dottie and everybody.
Democrats are fighting to maintain control of the Virginia General Assembly. And in the forefront of this election is who will become Virginia's next governor. Former Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg says it's a pivotal race.
So when a future generation says, what were you doing back in the 2020s when it was all on the line, you're going to say, I was there when it all turned around, starting on election day in Virginia.
Buttigieg is throwing the full weight of his support for former Democrat Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger. It's in Fredericksburg where he urges volunteers to canvass for votes.
That act of persuasion, driving turnout, encountering people, looking them in the eye and saying, this is what this means to me.
Enforcing the strength of Democratic support is former President Barack Obama, who is part of this new ad and will campaign with Spanberger in Norfolk on November 1st. Republican challenger Lieutenant Governor Winsome Earle-Sears was also canvassing for votes in Chesapeake a few days ago. She's pushing issues like safety, school policies, and Democratic Attorney General candidate Jay Jones' text controversy.
And the question is, did he, President Obama, ask Abigail Spanberger why she has not withdrawn her endorsement of Jay Jones, who advocated for the murder of his political opponent?
With only 2 weeks left before the election, Earle-Sears is also getting a boost of confidence from President Donald Trump, who says he supports her.
I think the Republican candidate is excellent, and I think the Democrat candidate is a disaster.
Virginia Commonwealth University just released a new poll showing Spanberger is leading with 49%. Earle-Sears is at 42%. And since July, this poll shows the margin has only gotten smaller. In Fredericksburg, Matthew Torres, WUSA 9.
Yeah, that same poll also asked voters about the lieutenant governor and attorney general races. In the recent race for lieutenant governor, State Senator Ghazala Hashimi is in the lead, but not by much. She holds a 1-point edge over Republican candidate John Reed. In the race for attorney general, Republican incumbent Jason Miyares is ahead. He has a 3-point lead over Democrat Jay Jones. It's a big shift from VCU's poll last month. At that point, Jones had won a 6-point lead over Miyares. And we're also talking to the experts about Virginia's race for governor. Joining me now is Matthew Klein from the Cook Political Report. It's an independent, nonpartisan newsletter, and we've constantly seen Spanberger leading Earle-Sears in the polls. Thank you so much for joining us. But Republicans believe their support may be undercounted. Like, how much weight should we really put on the polls at this stage?
You know, I think the polls have been fairly consistent in this race that Abigail Spanberger has a lead of somewhere in the range of, 5 to 8 points. It could end up being a little smaller than that, but it would be a pretty anomalous polling error at this point for Winsome Earl Sears to pull this thing off. We have the race in the likely Democrat column. It's not in solid, right? This isn't necessarily over. It's not impossible to see Winsome Earl Sears pulling it off, but Abigail Spanberger is a pretty comfortable favorite right now.
Matthew, the candidates had their first and the only debate earlier this month. How do you think they performed, and do you think the debate will have a real impact on who people will vote for?
We've already seen some clips from the debate make their way into television advertising, most notably Winsome Earl Sears asking Abigail Spanberger why she is not, necessarily willing to call on Jay Jones, the Democratic candidate for Attorney General, to drop out of that race. I think, Spanberger has tried to make a fairly consistent case that Earl Sears is too extreme for the state of Virginia, too extreme, more in line with Trump than with Governor Glenn Youngkin. And one example of that was on an issue about same-sex marriage, where Earl Sears expressed, some reticence about supporting that. So I think, Spanberger's job was really to kind of avoid any really bad headlines, maintain a lead in the polls after that debate. And so far, it seems like that has happened.
Yeah, we just mentioned the endorsements. Both candidates have gotten Obama for Spanberger and Trump for Earl Sears. Well, it was kind of an endorsement. Do you think those endorsements will have any impact? And why do you think Trump waited so long to weigh in on this race? He's mentioning Virginia, but didn't really chime in until just recently when he was asked by reporters.
Well, Virginia's races are always nationalized, in part because of its proximity to the nation's capital, obviously, but because it's also only one of two races that's holding its one of two states that holds its governor's races in these odd numbered years right after presidential races. And so I'm not sure that Barack Obama or Donald Trump are necessarily going to persuade anybody who wasn't already kind of interested in this race. It might help a little bit with turnout for Democrats on the margins in Southeast Virginia, maybe with African American voters. I think Trump, refrained from endorsing Earl Sears in part because Earl Sears expressed openness to a different presidential candidate in 2024 after the presidential election in 2020 when Trump attempted to overturn the results. And Trump holds grudges. And I think what we've seen is that Trump, he held that grudge. He was not particularly excited about Winsome Earl Sears from the beginning. Trump likes a winner. It doesn't seem like Winsome Earl Sears is on path to win, at least not right now. And I think, ultimately he just probably didn't. I've heard from a couple of folks that his inside staff wasn't all too pleased with the way that her campaign was being conducted. And so, ultimately it makes sense he's weighing in with sort of a half endorsement here at the end. But I don't think he wants to make it seem like he's gone all in for her, put his chips down on the table, when in reality that just may not pay off.
Yeah, I think it was telling that he couldn't even mention her name. But Virginia has often been seen as a political bellwether. How might the outcome of the race signal national trends ahead of the 2026 midterms or even the 2028 presidential election?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, Democrats are very keen after losing last cycle to prove that they are capable of notching a win and picking up some ground here, and they're going to have to do that next year. And so Virginia is a good test case for them. If they're not winning in Virginia, something has gone very, very wrong. Virginia often, votes against the party in power in the White House, and also it's a state that didn't vote for Donald Trump. So it would be very unusual if Democrats didn't pull it off. But also, Virginia has a number of very competitive House races, including in the 2nd district down in Virginia Beach. That's Jen Kiggin's district, Republican. Some other seats around the state. Democrats are targeting the 1st district, Rob Whitman, in the Richmond area, and of course Eugene Vindman in northern Virginia. So there are going to be a lot of interesting races here. We'll be watching to see how Abigail Spanberger and Winsome Earl Sears do in each of those districts as potential early bellwethers for whether Democrats could end up picking some of those seats up.
And Matthew, you just mentioned some regions there. Do you consider these to be like the battleground regions in Virginia this year? And what do you know about how they're leaning so far?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the reality is every vote is important. I think sometimes people get a little bit lost in picking certain regions out. The Hampton Roads area is always important. Virginia Beach is a very important bellwether. It swings with the political tides. But this race really, a lot of it's going to come down to Northern Virginia, not only because Northern Virginia is so populous, the most populous metropolitan area in the state, but also because Donald Trump's push for reducing the size of the federal workforce was uniquely impactful here, and it's a part of the state where there is a lot of resentment about the Trump administration, and where you could see folks go into the ballot box and try and take their anger on Trump any way they can, which in this case would be to vote a Democratic ticket.
Yeah, and perhaps that response to the government downsizing might be why early voting numbers are up across Virginia. So far, more than 706,000 people have already voted. At this time in 2021, 456,000 people had voted early. That's according to the Virginia Public Access Project. What's driving those early voting numbers, and who do you think will benefit from this?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's a lot of money that's going into this race. I don't need to tell anyone who's watching this channel that between every segment, there's an advertisement for one candidate or another up and down the ballot. And so I think obviously people are paying attention. Again, national issues are a hometown issue in much of Virginia. So I think a lot of people have a very vested interest in this race and making sure that they have the opportunity to exercise their voice and their vote, and whether it's standing up to the Trump administration, as I think a lot of Democrats are eager to do, or as some Republicans are, taking the opportunity to show their solidarity with President Trump.
Yeah, you mentioned those ads. What messaging do you think is resonating the most with voters right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the more effective ads that I've seen this cycle has been from Spanberger, where she's touting her support from law enforcement officials in the state. It really plays into this idea that she's not a typical Democrat, that she's got herself a law enforcement background, obviously having worked at the CIA. And I think that she's really tried to position herself as sort of the pragmatic, moderate candidate that she sort of was when she served in the U.S. House of Representatives, occasionally willing to buck her party on some issues, fairly rational, willing to work with the other side of the aisle. And her ads against Winsome Earl-Sears have also been fairly effective, in part because they use Sears's own language. Sears talking about abortion being wicked. These aren't just attacks, specious attacks being lobbed from one direction, accusing a candidate. This is actually Winsome Sears on record saying this, and I think that usually makes for a more potent hit.
Matthew, before we leave, what's the one thing you'll be watching most closely on election night?
Yeah, I'm going to be watching to see probably minority turnout, black turnout. Generally it's a little bit harder for Democrats to get some of their base to the polls sometimes. If minority turnout's really bad, then that could be a signal that Democrats are continuing to have a minority problem much like they had last year in the 2024 election. And that could obviously come with broader national consequences.
Matthew, we really appreciate the context, you giving us your insight. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
All right, and we really want to see how young voters feel about this upcoming election. So we invited them to watch this month's debate between Abigail Spanberger and Winsome Earl-Sears. Our Katie Lesso got their reactions.
Who came into this with the intention of thinking they were going to go to the polls and vote for Abigail Spanberger?
Thursday night, WUSA 9 hosted 12 George Mason University students. 8 walked in planning to vote for Abigail Spanberger, and 1 was set on Winsome Earl-Sears.
Were any of you completely undecided?
I came in undecided.
By the end, they had thoughts.
Sears did better at, when I heard her speaking, I felt like she cared more about the issues.
Spanberger really failed to, make an impression.
She played both sides a little bit. She did all the attacking, but when she was when something was put up against her, she could defend it with
calling Abigail by her name, Abigail, every time that she made a statement. Yeah. By turning to her when she asked her a question. You notice that Spanberger didn't even reference Earl-Sears by her name. It was ma'am.
Spanberger looked stiff.
While they agreed that Earl-Sears did most of the talking,
but I don't think she talked about issues that Virginians stand up.
One part that stood out to them, Spanberger saying Earl-Sears voted for anti-LGBTQ measures.
Earl-Sears responding out of turn that wasn't discrimination, I thought was probably like the most shocking moment of the debate for me.
I think the kind of biggest theme that we saw in tonight's debate was the rhetorical pattern and constant idea of deflection. And it was kind of this idea that voters are going to be the ones that decide big issues that governors should in reality be deciding.
But the interrupting on Earl-Sears' part got mixed reviews from the students.
All the analysis that goes into this will be about the things that Earl Sears said, what she did wrong, and what worked really well for her.
Now that we know that there's going to be a female governor, she kind of represents that. She's not just going to sit back and be quiet, right? And I think that a lot of people that, because of that, they want a governor who's going to go out and make change.
If you interrupt every time she speaks, that is a clear indication that you are not respecting her time to speak.
I want to look at her, I want to look at the interruptions, I want to look at all of the asking, like, she got done asking, what about your kids, what about your kids? To me, that's something Trump would do to his opponent, and people, even though they don't like that, they say they don't like that, they love it.
Me as a young voter, I'm not going to look at someone who's blatantly disrespectful, someone who's always willing to interrupt somebody and be able to get what they want.
Do you guys all feel like that? Do you feel like you're walking away disappointed?
So although I can't say there was a definitive winner, I do think there was a definitive loser, and that was definitely everybody watching the debate tonight.
Katie Lusso, WUSA 9.
Also new tonight, the Democratic National Committee is pouring more money into Virginia. It's part of a wider push, including other off-year election states like New Jersey and Pennsylvania. Today, the committee announced it's investing an additional $500,000 into get out the vote operations. According to Reuters, the committee has now spent more than $6 million in those 3 states. That money will be used to hire staff, contact voters, and expand the party's reach. We know the race for Virginia's Attorney General has gotten a lot of attention in recent weeks. Even President Trump has weighed in. Our Katie Lusso has been closely following the race. Katie, where does the president stand?
Yeah, well, Raphael, it should come as no surprise that he is backing Republican candidate Jason Miyares. However, he also had some pretty strong words to share about why he does not think Jay Jones should be running at all.
You mean the one that wanted to kill somebody's children and kill somebody? You mean the animal that wanted to kill somebody who should not be allowed to be running for that office?
President Trump with strong opinions about what he thinks of Jay Jones, but the actual question the president was asked Sunday night aboard Air Force One to respond to what Jay Jones said during the debate between he and Republican candidate Jason Miyares.
As Attorney General, I can't wait to see Donald Trump in court. I will never flinch or back down from him. I relish that fight.
I can't imagine anybody voting for Jay Jones. I would think he wouldn't even be allowed to do that. Anybody would be put in prison for what he said. So he can join the long list of attorney generals that have been suing and losing.
The text that Jay Jones has admitted to sending in 2022, imagining violence against then House Speaker Todd Gilbert and his family, came up almost immediately during the debate.
I am ashamed. I am embarrassed. And I'm sorry.
You may say that you are sorry, but look back at what happened. You had 3 years to say you're sorry, Jay, and you didn't.
The conversation transitioning to the topic of accountability, Miyares pointing a finger to not only the text Jones sent, but a prior reckless driving record.
Jay, if you were to apply to be a line prosecutor in not just my office, any attorney general office in the country, you would not pass a background check.
I cannot take back what I said. But you have my word that I will always be accountable for my mistakes.
The debate lasted 1 hour, and they touched on several topics, including what they do about crime.
As a member of the General Assembly, we funded law enforcement at record levels. Jason and I sat in that chamber together. I voted yes, and he voted no. As an assistant attorney general, I took on the gun lobby. I took on the largest ghost gun manufacturer in this country, and we brought them to their knees and put them out of business.
The reality is Jay Jones is a criminal first, victim last politician. We know it from his own voting record. 70 Virginians are dead today. Dead today because a felon that was supposed to be behind prison got out early because of Jay Jones' vote and law that he championed.
Where they stand on immigration.
We have to protect civil rights and civil liberties here in this Commonwealth and make sure that everybody is afforded due process. Now, I will also say that when we talk about immigration right now, Republicans have full control of Washington and have not lifted a finger to try to help alleviate some of the problems that we are seeing.
Every state has become a border state. We have seen it in Virginia. We've seen it by these transnational gangs like MS-13 and TDA. They are ruthless. They are violent. It's not just narcotics trafficking, it's human trafficking. It's extortion. Every community they enter into, they hurt the innocent.
And what their top priorities will be.
We deserve an attorney general who's going to put Virginia first and protect us, protect our assets, protect our resources, protect our institutions to lower costs.
Your safety has been my #1 mission as your attorney general. That also means consumer protection. We have gotten some of the largest settlements in the history of Virginia against big pharmaceutical companies that targeted Virginians. We've had $1.2 billion in recovery in consumer protection. Why? Because standing up for Virginia has always been what I've done.
Now, neither candidate took questions from reporters following the debate, and we now know this is likely the only debate that will happen between these two. Rafael?
Thanks so much, Katie. You can watch the entire Attorney General debate right here on WUSA 9+. It's streaming for free, so you can watch whenever it's convenient for you. We put together an easy-to-use voter guide with everything you need to know. Just text the word VOTE to the number on your screen. It's 202-895-5599. We'll reply with a link to our guide. You can also find it on our website, WUSA9.com. We'll be right back with a check of your weather.